Welcome back to the VTuber Voices Podcast, or if you are here for the very first time, hello, my name is Syafire, and I am your host. On this podcast, we love talking about what it's like to be a virtual character, as well as streaming and content creation tips. We also cover what it's like to own a small business and how to begin scaling that business. In today's episode, I'd like to talk about a topic that comes up quite often, and that is, should we give our VTuber characters lore? This applies not only to VTubers, but the characters and personas we build as our mascots or our personalities for YouTube, Twitch, or whatever else you might be using a character for. I have a very strong opinion on this topic. I believe that creating lore is essential to building a more immersive experience and brand. This being said, let's talk about why lore actually matters. Lore creates a personal experience and connection to our character and to our audience. Think about some of your favorite characters across all of time. Maybe you love Simba from The Lion King, or perhaps you love Elsa from Frozen, maybe even Hiccup from How to Train Your Dragon, maybe even another character. What is something that all these characters have in common that makes them so lovable? They have a backstory and they have lore. They have values and things that make them beautifully human. They have flaws, they have pros, they have cons. They are beautifully human or beautifully a lion if we're talking about Simba. Sure, it would be cool if we met Elsa as a streamer. If she was just a random girl with ice powers, that'd be pretty interesting, but it's because we know her backstory and the struggles that she has overcome as a character that makes her so relatable, lovable, and just overall creates more depth for who she is and how she interacts with the world. Now that we understand why lore matters, let's talk about 3 ways that you can start building lore to create a deeper connection to you and your character, as well as your audience right now. Number 1, you can answer questions about your character. Close your eyes and imagine your character. What does their world look like? Who are their friends? Who are their enemies? And what kinds of plants and creatures live on their planet? What do they want and what do they need? All of these are the beginning of a much more in-depth question that we can ask to help get to know our characters better. For example, my character, or me, Syafire, in my early childhood days, I wanted to help creatives all across the universe solve their problems. However, what Syafire needed is to support her own world in creativity before she could help others build their own. She had to find a way to build strong pillars for herself before getting what she wants. This creates conflict in her journey in finding herself so that she can help others. This being said, there are many websites and places you can look to get started with asking questions about your character to start developing them further. I encourage you to get a pen and a paper to start jotting down information about your character. Remember, you can always start with questions if you're unsure about where your character belongs or where to start. Number 2 is mind mapping. Mind mapping is a really great technique that can be used for any form of creativity, not just in writing. Mind mapping is when you put a word in the center of a piece of paper and branch out from it. You may have done this in school before for a project, so if we're talking about Elsa, we could put Elsa in the middle of the paper and start branching off. What does Elsa make us think of? Ice, cold, independence, and powerful. See how these words can start giving you imagery of world building and continuing to develop lore for your character? Maybe you need to start with the word ice in the middle because you don't actually have an idea of who your character is yet, but maybe you do know that they want ice powers. Then you can make connections to what ice makes you think of, which again can help start building visuals and ideas for stories, world building, and character design. So again, get a piece of paper and some colorful pens and start mind mapping. Number 3 is freeform writing. Freeform writing is actually one of my favorites. This can be a challenging one to start with if you don't have any idea of what you want to do. If you feel stuck, I recommend one of the first 2 methods. This one is usually a tool to use after you've done a mind map or answered questions. Freeform writing is sitting down with a nice hot cup of tea or coffee, whichever you prefer, and grabbing your favorite pen. Get a notebook and let your mind free flow. The idea of freeform is that it doesn't have to be official or even canon. This can be simply a rough idea of what you want. This way you can start reworking it and go back to perfect the story. Let this be a time to roll in your mistakes or in your fear. I promise it'll be okay. The idea of freeform writing is to really just let loose whatever is in your mind. It's okay if that's not where you want to go yet, or you're like, I don't really know if this is it yet. That's totally fine. Freeform writing is a great way to break past the mental blocks and the fear we have of building our characters, because we want to make them lovable. We want to make them great. We want to make them likable by our audience. But sometimes you just have to break past that mental block that you're having in order to write them by just getting something out on the piece of paper. It can be overwhelming and intimidating to write lore, and I know we all want to make sure that our characters are memorable. But with these 3 tools, question asking, mind mapping, and freeform writing, they'll be great ways to start developing lore if you don't have any. If you have no lore, I would encourage you to write lore to increase the quality of your character and of your content. So what kind of lore are you going to start writing for your character? Are you going to start with freeform writing and just let your mind run wild? Are you going to do some mind mapping and get some fun colorful pen? Or are you going to start answering questions about your character? These are all things for you to consider when making your character, developing your world, developing your brand, and where you want to go. Thank you so much, Gems, for joining us on this week's episode of the VTuber Voices Podcast. Now, go write some lore and let go of those fears. Hakuna Matata. I will see you next Friday for another episode of the VTuber Voices Podcast. Bye!